Hey dads, welcome back to the Fit Dad Club podcast. You're here with Jason Barrett. I'm not joined by Travis Jones this week. We've had a few big changes coming to our programs and the stuff that we're delivering for our guys. So it'll just be me for this week, and it'll just be a bit of a shorter episode and one that's been on topic for me lately, but I know that a lot of other dads and a lot of other guys deal with in general, which is, also about that, is injury prevention, and specifically for me, talking a little bit about the back injury and some of the stuff I've been learning in healing that and rehabbing that. And just in general, understanding injury, understanding risks, and understanding the fact that lifting weights and moving your body, even though it is the thing that for a lot of people, they relate it to the thing that causes an acute injury, like, oh, I was deadlifting or I was doing this and that's the thing that hurt my body and that's the thing that, that gave me the injury. Injuries, especially lower back injuries, are a lot more common for people who don't lift weights than for people who do. Yes, there may be an acute flare up for some people, but the protective nature of building joints, of building range of motion, of building movement cannot be understated. And for a lot of people, their injuries and their pain often comes from, for a lot of guys, it's from being overweight initially. Having excess body fat puts a lot more pressure on your joints, puts a lot more pressure on your knees, puts a lot more pressure on your hips, forces your lower back to compensate in a way that, similar to how when women get pregnant, they have to compensate in their lower back and in their upper back for a big weight hanging from the front of them. Same thing happens when guys get a beer belly. When we get a gut, it happens. Like, you've got to compensate in other ways, and that forces you into positions which mean that you're not entering things like maybe you're not going into bending your lower back and rounding your lower back, or going into flexion, as they call it, as frequently. And that means you lose that ability. You tend to lose the ability to sit in that place. And then when you do eventually go down to tie your shoe or sit on the toilet or whatever, and then you get out of that, it's like, well, this is a range of movement that we've not been in for a while. And we're now doing it with speed and with a lot more weight, not ready for it. Like, shut it down. That's essentially what will happen for a lot of people's injuries. And it may be things like pop discs and slip discs and bulging discs and that kind of stuff in the back too. All of that has the potential to happen. So when you are considering your injury risk, number one is looking at, am I carrying excess weight that I just simply do not need to be carrying? Because above and beyond that, it usually means that you're not moving enough. You're not moving much. You're not walking and getting movement in your hips, in your knees, in your ankles. And over time, you lose that, right? So number one is, am I overweight? Number two, when it comes to injury prevention, am I going through full ranges of motion, or am I accessing the full range of motion that I'm able to do? Am I attempting to go into full knee flexion, or as much knee flexion as I can? Or am I stopping halfway down? Am I pushing my arms completely overhead, or am I stopping about, halfway up when I'm doing a shoulder press? Pushing your body through its full range of motion that you can safely do without pain is vital for you to progress that range of motion and to keep that range of motion. If you're doing for example, a goblet squat, and you can't go all the way down, even doing something like elevating your heels on a plate, holding a dumbbell in front of you to get all the way down so that you are getting that full range of knee flexion, you are getting all the way down, will help you get better knee flexion, will help you get better ankle mobility because you're stretching those ranges. So making sure that when you are moving through full ranges of motion. You're not stopping your bench press halfway down, right? You're allowing your shoulders and your hands to come all the way back behind your shoulders if your flexibility allows for that. And you're progressing that over time. You don't increase your weights just so you can ego lift, because that's when you put your joints through too much strain and too much pressure that they're not ready for. And when you do that, and this is why people get injured, they put too much weight on the bar and they lift it in an erratic way or a very fast way. That means that their joints and their body just do not have the tolerance for it. There are weights that you can lift that your muscles are potentially accustomed to or can lift, but your joints and your connective tissue and the cartilage and the discs and all of that different structure may not have the capacity for. And you could be lifting something that, let's say, for example, your legs and your legs and your glutes and they can handle. But the small interconnecting muscles in your lower back, and I've been going sort of deep into this, there's so many different muscles at different depths within the back that protect the spine, that connect from each vertebrae to each other. Those muscles may not be able to take that load. Those muscles may not be able to take what you're doing. And if you're lifting with a perfectly straight back and you're always walking around like a robot and you always, lift with your legs, not with your back, and you're just being completely rigid all the time, sure, that is quote unquote protective of your back, But if you're lifting with that level of stiffness all the time, you're eventually going to lose the ability to properly go into full extension and round your lower back forwards and round it backwards and arch it. You're going to lose that. And then whenever you happen to bend over and pick up your kid or do something like that, you're going to bend over, you're going to round your back, because you're not going to do that with perfect form every time. You're going to reach over and try and catch them before they fall, and then you're going to feel a pop or a crack and oh shit, because you might be able to deadlift 150 kilos if you've got your lifting belt on and you're bracing and you've got everything nice and rigid and stiff, and that's a good skill to have. But you've also got to trust your body through movement before you can really be sort of injury free and best protected against things like injury. So you've got to know that the big muscles can certainly take a high amount of load or a high amount of volume, but there might be a lagging or a limiting factor being all of those little intramuscular, vertebral muscles, all of the little things that you don't really consider or don't really potentially train very often, because you've been told, oh, you don't want to train your lower back, that's how you injure it and all that kind of stuff. So it's like any muscle. All of your muscles are like any muscle, right? You want to be able to grow them. You want to be able to condition them to greater and greater loads. Now, it's important when you are doing this not to just go straight into the deep end and do a shit ton of work and start doing like Jefferson curls and all this extension work that you've not done before. You've got to slowly increase it over time, and you've got to build up what we call your tissue tolerance, right? It's a phrase that I've heard from a guy I follow whose name's Lower Back Ability on Instagram. Very good lower back focused stuff. But you build up your tolerance to the load. You build up your tolerance to that movement, to do it without pain over time. You want to expose your body to blood flow. You want to expose those muscles that are maybe not as developed because they've been ignored or trying to be avoided. You want to expose them to some stimulus so that they can grow, so they get blood flow, so they heal, so they get better. And you want to make sure you do that in a nice, slow, controlled way where you're paying attention over the course of weeks to how much effort and how much movement am I putting through these. For me, a lot of my injuries came from using the muscles before they were 100% ready, and I knew they weren't 100% ready, but I thought it would be fine because it wasn't that painful, and then my body was like, no, that's too much. Well, for example, if I had done some gardening the day before and done something like taken a pitchfork and cored my lawn, which is a very slow process, and done a bunch of raking and mowing and weeding and stuff, then there was a lot of bending over, spending a lot of time in that position where I haven't spent a lot of time, or I don't typically spend a lot of time. And especially with my lower back, having not built up that tolerance, when I then went to do anything that potentially rounded my lower back, it became too much. And then I didn't give it the time that it needed to get better. And then in one jerking motion for me, it was getting off the toilet, and then bang, the lower back went. So considering how fast you're moving, how rigid you've been in your life, you need to ease into flexing and moving those different muscles and stretching them to their maximal ranges of motion in a safe way. So if it's your knee, being willing to go through full knee flexion or as much knee flexion as you can tolerate. And the key here is not to do it once, really hard, once a week, and then never do it again. The key here is to slowly go through it over time, maybe 3-4 times a week with like one set, right? You're doing it once a day for 30 seconds to a minute, and you're just getting that stretch in, maybe day off, day on, day off, day on, just to kind of test that limit for yourself and see, all right, well, if I do it for a minute, let's say I never spend any time in knee flexion when my knees are bent fully, and I spend a minute there, how does that then feel for me the next day? Oh, fuck, it's a bit tight. Okay, cool. I need to really ease into it. You've got to slowly expose your body to the thing that you're worried about in order for you to ever heal from it or ever get better from it. That is just one of the things that is vital, which is why they say, if you injure yourself, you've got to get up and walking. The more you stay still, the more you just lie down, the less likely it is that that those things will heal. My cousin tore his Achilles, and in his rehab, his goal was to make sure he trained his other Achilles, his other leg, so that his, the leg that was injured wouldn't atrophy, because when you're moving it, even that is enough for the body to send blood flow and nutrients to the other one so that it wouldn't completely atrophy. You don't want to just lie down completely and just, say, oh, fuck it, I give up, right? So make sure you're not carrying excess body weight. Make sure you're pushing your joints and everything through full ranges of motion. You're not cutting yourself short on any of those ranges of motion. You're trying to get as deep as you can, and you test it with small amounts of work, like not a lot of heavy, not 5 sets really heavy, but you're doing really light and you're doing a couple of sets very frequently, and you're exposing yourself constantly to this stimulus over time, and you're considering, well, what are the other lifestyle factors going in? Do I sit down for 8 hours a day? Is that playing a role in my hip tightness, in my lower back tightness? And everything kind of interconnects. So if for my lower back being tight, I also know that my ankles are quite tight, which will probably affect my form when I squat. I mean, my lower back takes over. I also know that my hip flexors are really, really tight, and they're sitting at the front of your spine, and they connect to the back of your spine. So you've got to make sure that you are not ignoring any of those weak points if you want to move better, and if you want to be injury free and move in a way where, okay, I can get into these deeper positions or these awkward positions without everything getting so tight that it says, all right, it's a risk, I've got to flare up and seize up so that you don't injure yourself, and send you pain signals so you don't injure yourself, right? So make sure that whatever it is you're doing, whatever kind of injury you've got, whatever thing you're managing, that you're doing it in a sustainable way. You're not going balls to the wall in terms of your rehab, but you are willing to move it and willing to progress it. There's obviously varying degrees of injury, but more and more anecdotal research and anecdotal evidence is showing us that moving through these ranges and moving through these injuries and strengthening the muscles around these injuries in a very slow, controlled, and progressive way is vital for you to get stronger in those positions, and as a result, be less likely to injure yourself in those positions. If you have the tolerance within your muscles, if you've built the tolerance within your joints, within your connective tissue, within those little muscles. So that is the podcast that I wanted to give for you guys today. If you have any questions about this stuff, let me know. I'm not an expert on it by any means, but it is something that I have been learning and getting into, and it's been making a hell of a lot of sense. So don't jump into anything crazy without actually taking a look first at, where your body is at, and then slowly moving into it from there. But the goal should be to move through these ranges and move through and make sure you are moving in as many different ranges and as many different ways as possible, so that you're not leaving yourself with any weak spots in terms of, if I bend over to the side and then all of a sudden my back goes, right? You want to have all of your bases covered. If you are wanting to work on getting that extra body fat off, which is probably one of the number one things to help prevent those lower body and lower limb injuries, make sure you connect with us at fit-dad.club. Book in a call. We'll have a chat with you about where you are and where you want to be. But until next week, with hopefully Trav on as well, I'll look forward to speaking to you all then. Take care.